As 2024 is coming to a close, I felt like making a top 5 games I personally played this year. To make it as simple as possible, I only had 2 rules when picking my games. First of all, it doesn't have to be a game released in 2024. And secondly, it must be a game I either played for the very first time, or a game I've started but not played long enough to have a concrete opinion. And just to make it clear, it's my personal list and you are free to disagree. Lastly, I just want to say this video is very much inspired by Digital Foundry's Games of 2024, the John Lindemann collection. Without further ado, let's begin. Having waited 4 years for the sequel to 2020's Final Fantasy VII Remake, safe to say I was ecstatic to finally play the second game in the remake trilogy. In many ways, it did meet my expectations and more. The world, characters, gameplay all felt right at home for Final Fantasy, pushing the PlayStation 5 to its limits in both good and bad ways. As expected, Square Enix changed the structure from a chapter-to-chapter into an open world to accommodate storytelling as we continued Cloud's and the gang's adventure to stop Sephiroth. This allowed Square Enix to highlight the world of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Exploring the world of Gaia never felt boring as there were always amazing photo opportunities at every turn, from the breezy sea town of Costa del Sol to the vast canyons of Cosmic Canyon. I simply could just stop and stare for hours upon end. While I never experienced the original back when it first launched in 1997 for the original PlayStation 1, I imagine for those who did, this is what they imagined each location looked like on their CRT TVs. The combat received an overhaul by keeping it a real-time turn-based combat system, as you have access to new and old party members at any given point, giving the player the tools to mix and match your favorite characters while you bash at enemies with synchronized special attacks known as synergy, making for spectacular action set pieces. While turn-based games have long existed before Final Fantasy, Square Enix just knows the formula to make combat feel engaging, yet challenging, while keeping some of the mechanics locked behind the story progression, just enough to keep it fresh and through the whole journey. But just because it's a well-beloved series doesn't mean it's flawless. Despite the amazing environments, engaging and relatable characters, and addicting combat system, the change to an open world led to some technical issues that has been since improved by having to select between high fidelity 30 FPS or low fidelity with blurred visuals and 60 FPS wasn't the experience I hoped for. Let's just say that. Furthermore, as someone who loves Platinum games, this was one of the worst experiences I had getting a Platinum. The sheer content of side quests, minigames, and exploring the secrets of each era in Gaia easily takes up 100 hours of your time. The sudden difficulty spikes at the end for some of the side content, especially Shadley's Battle Simulator with its boss fight challenges, made my hands physically hurt from the amount of attempts getting the rewards. By the time I got a Platinum trophy, I was so done with the game and immediately deleted it from a PlayStation 5, and the less I talk about Final Act, the better. Thus, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth just makes my top 5. As someone who played the original Hades well after its release, and someone who barely had any experience with roguelite at the time, it quickly became one of my favorite games of 2021. So when Supergiant Games announced the sequel during the Game Awards 2022, you bet I wasn't going to miss playing Hades 2 from day one. This time around, you play as Melinoe, the daughter of Hades and Persephone and the younger sister of Zagreus, on her quest to defeat Kronos, the Titan of Time who has overthrown House of Hades and turned the underworld to a dictatorship. Gameplay expands upon the foundation of the original, introducing new weapons and boons alongside new characters and returning favorites. Each boon has their advantages and disadvantages, but no matter what, with each playthrough you will most likely feel unique, due to the chances you will never have the two exactly the same playthroughs, as using trial and error to figure out the best playstyle for you is a never-ending quest that keeps you engaged. The environments and music are absolutely fantastic, and the boss fights are great, as you barely feel as if it's the game's fault for dying. The reason why Hades isn't ranked higher is due to the fact the game is still in early access and thus a lot of the story and game features are incomplete, and its genre as a roguelite means you'll have to put in countless hours that don't have time anymore. As my love for JRPGs have grown in recent years, Octopath Traveler is one game I've heard so many talk about, and is considered an underrated gem. And after I played it early this year, I'm inclined to agree. Originally developed for the Nintendo Switch, co-developed by Square Enix and acquired in Unreal Engine 4, from the moment you boot up the game, I immediately was awestruck by the technical prowess to make a game on Switch with an engine known for its 3D use and realism, coming in at only 3 GB on the Steam version. You play as 8 different characters, each with their own story in the world of Astera, a medieval world filled with knights, assassins, monsters, and demons to slay. The standout without question for me is the art direction. In a gaming landscape where most games are chasing realism and highly detailed fidelity, Octopath Traveler is what Square Enix calls HD 2D, essentially 2D sprites moving in a 3D world. It makes for a refreshing experience while standing out from the crowd. Furthermore, it also has shown it's possible for retro games to come back without having to convert to full-blown 3D remakes like Final Fantasy VII, while retaining the magic and feel of Super Nintendo games. Where it falls short is the way the story is told. With thousands of dialogues and text prompts, it feels like you're reading a never-ending light novel rather than playing a video game. And with no option to out-advance the dialogues, eventually you just start skipping entire cutscenes, which defeats the purpose of a story-heavy game like this. And then you learn there's a mastermind who is responsible for all events that occurred. But since the game is locked behind a series of side quests, and the 8 stories are largely independent from each other, so it all feels like an afterthought. That's why Octopath is assigned number 3 spot. September 10th, PlayStation Showcase 2021. That's the day stellarblade, or Project Eve as was known back then, was publicly announced to the world. Immediately it caught my attention due to similarities to Nier Automata, the enemy designs, and the combat reminding me of Dark Souls, but most of all, it was a AAA game developed by Shift Up, a studio based in South Korea, industry where a lot of big budget games usually come from Japan, Europe or North America. It was refreshing to see an original big budget title coming from somewhere else, and contrary to what I initially believed, stellarblade, while on the surface looks and feels like Nier, is actually an action game with combat similar to Devil May Cry and Bayonetta, with gun mechanic and hack and slash, but at a much slower pace. And thanks to the haptic feedback, each hit feels impactful. Combining that with the visual effects, it's always a pleasure watching Eve slay her enemies in brutal fashion. Speaking of fashion, the amount of fan service Shift Up has given the community since its initial launch is to be applauded. Obviously, the sexual allure of Eve is a big selling point, but the fact that studio kept giving us free content when a lot of studios would charge you, it just shows how much love Shift Up put into the craft. My grips with stellarblade came down to its replayability and save system. While the game itself is relatively short, in order to get all of the outfits, it requires a minimum of 2 playthroughs, or in my case 4 playthroughs, because I wasn't actively looking for skins on my first one. You can't manually save, as stellarblade has only one automatic save slot. This is an issue because most DLCs requires you to have reached a certain point in the story, which if you have gone past the point of no return, your only option is to replay the game on New Game Plus, as you can't leave the final area. Hence why stellarblade gets the number 2 spot. And before I reveal my number 1 of 2024, here are some of the games I either wanted to play or just disappointed me. Having heard great things about Soulreaver and Blood Omen, as well as this being Amy Hennig, the writer behind Uncharted 1 to 3's greatest achievement, according to her own words, I was intrigued, but as soon as I started playing it, what I got was a lackluster classic that barely deserves the title remasters. Lack of quality features and visual upgrades combined with gameplay mechanics that are long outdated, as well as the music. While many rave about the soundtrack, I couldn't find myself liking it. The worst part was the clunky combat and camera. I felt I was fighting against the game itself rather than the enemies, and the lack of autosave caused me to play catch up to get back where I left off every time. So Rebirth 1 and 2 Remastered was a short to play, true despite the short game length of 5 to 10 hours per game. And then we have Epic Mickey Rebrush, Nine Souls, Metaphorrefantazio, Balatro, and blackmythwukong are all games I wanted to play, but due to lack of time and not wanting to take bank loans, I simply didn't have the opportunity to experience all the amazing games they were released this year. When the idea of ranking my top games of 2024, picking my number 1 was easy. It is a platformer which is one of my, if not my favorite video game genre. It's made by PlayStation Studio, ticking off another box, and it took me by surprise by how well the game mechanics are executed. You guessed it, it's Astro. In a year where PlayStation was supposed to have a quiet year, the sudden announcement of Astro at the PlayStation State of Play in May of 2024, just 4 months before its launch, I don't think anyone could have expected it to be the game of the year, and in my personal opinion, deservedly so. Everything from gameplay to the level design is chef's kiss. Astro always brings a new surprise, even when you think it's seen it all. It just shows how well executed the core mechanics are. A simple act of running around the game world feels great no matter what's happening on screen, thanks to the haptic feedback and handcrafted levels topped with the addicting music. Nearly every stage is an experiment that comes and goes, and when you finish a stage in Astro, there's a chance you want to replay the level immediately. That's the sign of a truly great platformer, because even when you complete the main story, there's always the speedrun levels and challenge stages, as well as many other reasons to keep playing. That's what makes Astro so special. You want to come back. While the abilities are temporary, they are refined to perfection, and you almost don't want to finish a level because you just want more. Obviously, I can't talk about Astro without mentioning the tribute to PlayStation's history, as there are over 150 VIP cameos from its 30 years of history, referencing everything from popular franchises like God of War to forgotten classics such as Ape Escape and Loco Roco, but also adapting their signature gameplay mechanics as part of Astro's skill set. So when the final level starts and the original PlayStation boot up sound kicks in and you see all the consoles and peripherals flying out the mothership, perfection. It just shows how much Team Asobi loves platformers and treasures PlayStation's deep history, something PlayStation has largely avoided in recent years, but its rival Nintendo leans into heavily. The game thus has its downfall, which is that the story is non-existent, but it doesn't need a great story to be a great game. Astro brought me back to a simpler time, and games were short and straight to the point, with no bloat, no microtransactions, and creators making games because they wanted to make and play themselves rather than making profit. As through Astro, I got to relive my childhood, finding many cameos that made me a fan of PlayStation brand to begin with. It gave me hope that Sony will bring back the long forgotten IPs for a new audience. That's why Astro is my game of the year for 2024. With that said, that concludes the video. Thanks so much for watching. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I see you in 2025.